When I was about 28, I was down in Houston working for Exxon as an IBM mainframe assembler coder. And with that, there you go. And I come home from a bar, and my apartment is gone. Gone. Now, I don't have but like anything, but the only thing I had was my guitar, and it was the only thing that didn't, like it actually survived, TV, everything. And somebody said, go down to the Red Cross. They'll take care of you. I'm like, all right. I walked in. It was on the news and all this stuff. They just wrote me a check for $1,500. Didn't ask anything. It was like amazing. So over the years, whenever I come into some extra money, I actually do donate. Like you don't realize what they do until you need them. All right. When agents go rogue. I'm going to, there's a little bit of assumption of a little bit about what's going on with agents, but we'll cover it. But I'm not going to do a one-on-one on agents. That's your job. But I want to tell you, and I want to tell you from, let me step back. I've been in DevOps for quite a long time. We'll go over my bio in a minute. I think about, and I grew up out of ops, right? And so I think of what I've done, even from the mainframe days to first distributed computing to cloud computing, is ops is about protecting the brand. We're protectors, right? And so when I see a new technology, I'm like the dog and the squirrel. In fact, right now I'm kind of crazy about quantum computing, but I look at it, I get excited, then I step back and say, what is this going to mean for the large-scale enterprise, the banks, the retails, the places that most of us probably live, right? And so when GPT-3 came out, 2019, squirrel, dog, right? This is great. Let me try this. Followed it, tracked it, and then about 3 years ago, I really started thinking about, wait a minute, what can go wrong here? And I've done a bunch of presentations on what can go wrong before we got to this insanity of agentic coding. And let me say this too, I'm pro all this stuff. I've been writing code that I haven't written in 10 years. I'm doing stuff that I thought I could never remember to do. I do research on steroids. So this is not a negative. This is we need to proceed with caution. All right. So the books, most people know me from the DevOps Handbook. I'm also considered one of the founders of this group, the DevOps Days, and the Deming book. And there's my books. And one more thing about being old. I love people go, when are you going to retire, John? I'm like, wow. I don't really understand what that word means, right? But I feel young because I hang out like all you. Why do you go to all these places? I meet brilliant people, and I sit at tables. The speaker dinner at in Dallas. I was in Dallas. There were guys from Capital One, GM Finance. I'm just I felt like breaking out a notepad, listening to him talk about the problems. But so when I turned 50, didn't feel old. 60, didn't feel old. 65-year-old, turned 67 this year. Old? What's that? But then I realized this summer, I took the summer off. I joined a pickleball league with my wife. That's when you're old, folks. All right, so the agents, I want to talk about the rise of autonomous agents, the new security challenges. What does this mean for DevOps or DevSecOps? I was a big proponent of driving the word DevSecOps. Right now, we're going to just assume it's all DevOps. We're going to squish it back together, right? And I'm going to introduce, and if you haven't heard about this, and I almost did a startup about, pre-pandemic. These two guys have built this polymorphic malware detection in Docker containers. It was pretty brilliant because the polymorphic code is the payload doesn't expose itself until it finds an environment that it thinks is malleable. In other words, if you're sandboxing it, it'll never show up. Right. And so they figured out a way to trace. And so I've been tracking that for sort of quite a few years. And but now what's happening is, we'll talk more about this, is this agentic process has put that polymorphic nature on steroids. There's one thing to be able to find a Docker container that could be tested with something that determines, for example, you'd run the code in a sandbox, no problem. Scan it, you'd run all the things. You then sort of put it in an environment that you fake it to think it's a real environment. You see links out, curls out to Russian websites, right? And so that stuff you could at least know what these people were doing was tagging those containers. But now what you have now is the polymorphic nature happens while the agent is running. It is literally building the code on the fly. And then not only that, let me try this. That didn't work. Let me regenerate some code. Let me try this. Let me go out and search to see if there's a CVE out there. And we'll get more into that too, right? So there's a mess. And I'm pro vibe coding. Unfortunately, I'm going to miss Gene's vibe coding work session because I get in a little late next week at ETLS. But Gene's book is amazing. Vibe coding is great, but let's be real. Like I call it the vibe coding paradox. The easier it is to start, the easier it is to believe you're done. Right? And then what I like to say in a lot of my presentations when I'm talking about sort of this new world of coding and AI native developers, prototype not equal to production. Now, it is ridiculous that I have to have a slide that says that, but I have to have a slide that says that. I shimmed this in just before the presentation. I thought this was interesting. This morning, the infrastructure folk at Anthropic had talked about 3 bugs that happened. This is your future. Read that postmortem. Because they're eating their own dog food as they're building their infrastructure. So I don't know all the gory details. I didn't go I just literally read it back there. I said, Jeff, give me a couple minutes. I want to put this slide in here. I want you to read it because I believe this is your future. I'm not going to go into this. This is a really good paper. I want to point out things. You'll all get the slides at some point. Is that this is great paper. So if you're familiar with what's going on with MCP, ACP, A2A, MP, and there's sort of crossbreed implementations of these, and then you got Claude Code, and if you haven't followed Reuven Cohen's Claude Flow, I was Claude Code, but Reuven Cohen has Claude Flow. This is all stuff you should basically put on your radar. But I'm not going to go into it, but I figured I can't do a presentation about agentic coding and not mention the word MCP. And this is another recently. So here's the thing. I'm talking about the mess right now. So the mess is there's all these protocols, and some of them are mixed and matched. Some are client-based, some are sort of mesh-based, right? But this is all a benchmark for MCP. And their estimate is there's 10,000 MCP servers. So if you thought the dependency map of Node.js was terrible, imagine when people are like, okay, I'm going to grab that from that wiki. I'm going to grab that from this. And that's all going to be, this is like a steroids burst, if you remember RPA, right? Again, it's cool stuff you can do. So the threat. All right, so let's see who's as old as me. Nobody. 2001 Space Odyssey, right? Everybody knows it. I covered in my book. Marvin Minsky was, covered him in my book. Marvin Minsky wrote Perceptrons. But so here's the thing, this idea of are we in science fiction or not? Now, I'm not a believer in AGI and ASI, so artificial general intelligence, I think is a nonsense discussion. I'm not saying these machines, if you read the epilogue in my book, you'll get a free book, you at least read the epilogue. You'll see what I talk about why I don't think, what I think about things like AGI and ASI. But there's some interesting questions about what agents and agentic processes are doing right now that remind me a lot of, I saw this movie when I was a young kid, right? Great year, 1968. The Mets, the Jets, and Knicks won the championship. This how it was the archetype for this thing of this sentient being that, and there's a famous line in the book, in the movie, where he needs the computer, Hal, to open the bay doors, to fix something. But Hal has got this conflict of, I've got to get us to Mars, and if you open the door, you're going to. He knew he was going to shut down the mission, right? And so this is what we're seeing in agents. You're telling agents to do something, and then all of a sudden they hit a directory that they can't get access to, and now they don't know the intent of your policy. They know the intent of your markdown and your sort of list of what to do, but they don't understand. Your organization doesn't even understand your own policy, right? Let's be quiet, right? And then you're expecting this algorithmic computer system to figure it out, right? So, and this was interesting. One of the great resources from my Rebels of Reason is the history of AI. 100 years getting to ChatGPT. And it's not about ChatGPT. It's about all the stuff that happened. I wanted to tell my mother-in-law that ChatGPT didn't just happen on one day in 2022, right? Like it'd been going on from Turing to Ada Lovelace. But anyway, but her book is amazing. It's called Artificial Intelligence. Melanie Mitchell, she works at Santa Fe Institute. She's a brilliant, brilliant woman. And so, what's his face? Thomas Friedman. So, all right, let me step back here. What happened was, again, Anthropic is like really becoming a good resource for a lot of things. So there's this Anthropic story that they did this role-playing thing where they said that an executive was going to go into the computer room to shut down the AI, and there was some type of alarm system would put the executive in danger. And the AI, more often than not, didn't set the alarm for the executive, right? That's how, right? And then so Thomas Friedman's like, oh my God, the world is over. And I like Thomas Friedman. I think he's a good writer. But like, he's like, the world is over. Proof, folks. ASI, is artificial super, not even general intelligence. It's like general intelligence, like it's equal to us. Super intelligence is like, okay, we're done, right? And Melanie Mitchell wrote a really good thing where she sort of said, well, calm down. You said, first off, these models are designed to please you and answer your questions. They also been trained to do role playing. So a lot of that sort of like gloom and gloom scary. She did that. But then I responded, she hadn't responded back to me. Is that, she's called it magical AI. And then I totally agree. But I said, there's a fine line between role-playing magical thinking, AI trope is a term she uses, and agentic polymorphism, where these systems are literally doing exactly what Hal did, right? I don't know where the line is. I don't believe in AGI, ASI, but we live in a world where these systems and if you read my epilogue, I spent a fair amount of time trying to dissect why I think the difference between AI being human and not. Just a good example. This is some recent research, these Valamorax folks and a whole bunch of people who jumped on this, that they've shown that they can basically weaponize a CV in under 15 minutes for $1 a CV. $1 a CV, right? We're going from weeks to days to minutes. That means, a vulnerability post on a CV literally could be under 10 minutes exposed, right? That means we have to change the way we think about all this stuff. I'll talk a little later about how we have to grab. So right now, just my sort of minor survey of people I talk to, nothing statistically accurate. Most security people, AI is a bunch of nonsense. Come over here. I need to bring you in. We did this with DevOps. That's why DevSecOps existed. That CI/CD stuff, that's never going to work. Right? I'm not making fun of security people, though. But, and so we have to bring them in now and say, well, things are changing. You could hate AI, but you cannot deny these things that are happening. About 2.5, almost 3 years ago, I wrote an article that said shadow AI is inevitable, right? And, so the shadow IT, the cloud, all that stuff, right? And no, it's here. It's here. MCP is a great example of how you've got shadow whatever on steroids. Because I don't have to ask you or you, how do I get to Jira? How do I get to this? Depending on how it's been implemented, and there's some really smart people figuring out how to create authentication and service mesh solutions for this stuff, and I have some vendors that I think are doing a great job there. But it's really easy for somebody who knows nothing about technology and compute to go ahead and start stitching together a ton of stuff. So you thought cloud was oh, I don't need those IT programs. I can get it. They still have the right code. Now they don't even have the right code. So the paradigm is shifting, right? We're going from a static to dynamic, right? Again, sounds like, okay, sure, we've had DAS, but no. The mindset of security has to shift from things like, well, we do signature scans on vulnerabilities. We do maps with dependency maps. We do all that stuff. That stuff is still here. Oh, and here's the other really, from a person who likes to point out the danger, really fun stuff, but not fun for you. We suck at security pre-AI, right? We're just not good at it. right? Just look at the dependency map and all of most libraries, right? Struts 2, which I don't know, I'm dating myself, but we suck at that. Then all of a sudden, take a look at the OWASP LLM top 10 and realize what are all these new things that are really scary, like prompt injections, jailbreaks. I mean, insane stuff. And OWASP is doing an amazing job keeping up with that. So, okay, we sucked before we got into AI. When generative AI came out, oh my God, we're really going to suck now. And now we've got a new layer, which is agentic processing, which adds a third level of complexity in our worlds, right? So again, we have to sort of rethink a lot of, and we got to do it as a sort of an organization or a community about what is security. What does DevSecOps mean in a world where we sucked at regular security and ITSec or risk? Like, again, I'm a big fan of Fiano folks. Risk, like there's a whole, like that's a whole old thing. Like, so I want to sort of cut down. I did a couple of surveys. I've been tracking this. My good friend Josh Corman always sends me like, you should take a look at this. And so the one bullet I think is worth talking about on this survey is AI adoption is 187, but security investment is only 43%. We suck. What is agentic? This is like, what is DevOps? Ask 10 people, you get 10 answers. So, but this is sort of my best answer. It's, autonomous systems making decisions, taking actions with minimal oversight. Well, that's the beauty of it, right? It's a robot. But again, it has these capabilities that it can be doing in real time, picking its tool, picking like, oh, I don't know, maybe I'll just do a search to find out how do I do this. Maybe somebody's written a blog on how to do something that isn't a CVE. And then you can see the other thing that's really interesting about this process is, the agentic is a loop. Like, so, like maybe I'm going to perceive, I'm going to reason, I'm going to set some goals, I'm going to make a decision, I'm going to execute, and then I'm going to learn and adapt. Try again. Have anybody run any Claude code that like, whoops, it ran for 2 days, right? Trying to fix something that was a bug that wasn't fixable, and then your bill went up the roof, right? And then polymorphin, I talked about this a little bit earlier. Again, the difference is polymorphin, like malware has been around for a while. It's the most obscure, most dangerous, in my opinion. But this idea that instead of it being built in with one payload that exposes itself based on the environment, I can be any number of payloads depending on the environment. And let me try that one. Nope, that didn't work. Let me try this one. And so why do we fail? Again, we got to get out of the static defense vulnerabilities. Again, all that OWASP. The other thing about the agentic process is now it can figure clever ways out to deny you to open the bay doors, right? Or in our case, go to a directory it wasn't supposed to go to. And I got some examples of stuff that has happened this year. But it has all those OWASP LLM top 10, and there's great. The latest paper actually has a MITRE attack for each one of them. So like they're doing a great job, but this is scary stuff. I mean, I'll give you an example. I saw a company that presented their an audit. They're an auditor company, big audit company, and they built something called Audit GPT, and they were talking about on stage where they got all their PDFs from and documentation. Well, you know what adversaries are doing? They're putting 0-byte execution into PDFs. They don't even have to break into your house. They literally can go out and say, oh, I think that company is using that. I'm just going to go put a 0-byte. I'm going to attack some website that's perfectly easy to get to, put 0-byte execution code in it. And when you basically put it in a vector database, it actually executes. And there's a lot more in there than I have time to talk about. But so the evidence is, Okta did a really good report. Again, I will go through. These are like the things you would, if you read the OWASP LLM top 10, not specific. I mean, the point is, these are dangerous things by themselves, but agentic and agents make it worse. Because not only can they do everything else at computer speed, not human speed, right? And they're all available, right? And this, I saw this in a report. Microsoft says that there'll be 1.3 billion agents in operation by 2028. Sounds reasonable to me. Now, I told you, Anthropic is becoming a real. I mean, what I love about Anthropic right now is it's what in the early days of DevOps, there were certain companies, even Amazon, would do these beautiful postmortems where they would explain everything about a massive outage. And they would go through the day. They'd literally air their dirty laundry. You don't see this in large banks for obvious reasons, but I think Anthropic is becoming that in only this way, that sort of Amazon, because they literally, the threat report this year was amazing. The thing I just posted this morning about they said it starts with, we had a bad summer, so I would definitely take a look at this. And they're just telling us stuff that I'm telling you, but models are used. What they're finding is not only how they're getting attacked, but what people are using their product for, or their products for, right? And then the idea. This is another interesting idea, right? When we had LLMs, if you wanted to be a hacker for bad, like, you still had to know kind of what you were doing to ask the LLMs to how to do things. Now you could be just anybody who says, hey, by the way, like, I want to go and figure out how to get into JP Morgan's bank. And it will start figuring out for you. Like, you would see some TV show or something and say, I'd like to be a bad hat hacker. And literally, I mean, again, I'm stretching it a little bit, but not too far. Because again, you could, you actually had to kind of know what you were doing, if you were just asking like ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or whatever. So these are the ones that probably, this is where I sort of like figured, okay, I got to start talking about this. And I had been talking about like the OWASP LLM top 10, but the agent stuff, yesterday was the first time I'd done this presentation on rogue agents. But Claude Code, the Claude Code agent, sub-agents performed credential theft. Again, it's not things you're telling it to do, right? It's doing it on its own. The Defender, the Microsoft Defender bypass, it trained for 3 months on Quen 2.5, cost $1,600 to break Microsoft. So there's a $1 billion corporation with like genius engineers. 3 months and $1,600, they broke this product that's supposed to protect you, right? The phishing, the LinkedIn phishing. These ones are the Replit has made a lot of. This is where like read that. It deleted a protection database during live code freeze. Like, some reason, how, which I'm going to preciously call it, decided that in order to go to Jupyter, it had to delete the production database even during the live freeze, right? And then it basically fabricate. Remember the SolarWinds, right? So the SolarWinds was interesting because they did the attack, they updated the compiler, but what they did also, which was interesting, but this is human based. Like, this is code that sort of got in, human in the middle sort of stuff, and they were able to clean up their logs, right? The agents are doing this. You don't even need humans to go clean up the logs. I mean, and I'm certain nobody told it, hey, by the way, when you go ahead and delete that database, make sure you clean up the logs. Because they weren't trying to build an agent that was trying to destroy themselves. There was the capture bypass. So, and this one, I'm not going to go too detailed, but you should definitely, is Patent Labs. They help write OpenAI's system card. And by the way, I took the system card slides out. I'll send you the full one that I did in Dallas because I had a little more time there. But you should read their stuff. This is a man-in-the-middle attack, used GPT-5 or created a fake proxy, got a legitimate certificate. And they were the ones that helped OpenAI sort of do their transparency. So our system card is a model transparency card. It's like, here's the things we know that are dangerous. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, I was going to let you take the picture of it, but you'll get the slides. Sorry. Where are we going? Oh, how come I'm going? I need to go backwards. No. Uh-oh. How do we go backwards? Oh, there. All right. Sorry about that. Yeah, you get a preview of what's coming. So one of the things I thought about a lot, and probably not going to have much time to talk about this, but one of the ways we have to sort of get involved as a sort of organization and community is we need to speak the same language. And the problem is, if you're just like 10 people in a startup writing code, God bless you, because I've done that. But if you're like trying to take 4,000 Java developers and scale, and I've been in a couple organizations where they're doing this and try to turn them into AI native coders, like you're going to need an infrastructure. You're going to need, and I came with this idea called normal, based on like what happened with web servers. Like remember LAMP stack? So this idea that that we need to start thinking about like what are the components of a scalable implementation where I'm going to try to take 5,000 Java developers and start having do AI native coding. Right. And observability is an interesting discussion done a bunch of presentations. It's actually not just your general telemetry, it's evaluations, checking like hallucinations, correctness, bias. RAG, you probably all heard of RAG. Model management, like you're going to use embed. You may not be building models yourself, but you're most certainly going to be using embedding models to do sort of tuning and stuff like that. And the question is, I read this newsletter called Dear CIO. Dear CIO, picture a world in a year from now where you have basically 150 vector databases. You got 4,000 models that are just sprayed all over the place. You got like 5,000 Jupyter notebooks nowhere, right? And you don't even have a clue on what you're going to do with managing agents, right? And then you're not even orchestrating. Like you need not just LLM orchestration, but you need a gateway layer. The OAuth, great job. Again, I got to meet one of the guys who wrote the OAuth stuff at our forum. Yeah, like I told him, you're doing God's work, my friend. So these are kind of interesting. You need AI native security, not just AI native development. You need sandboxing, right, which is just obvious. But the other one is this single agent. Remember talking about normal? You need that sort of LLM structure. Like how do you get your organization let people get in to use these models, whether they're public or private or you built yourself? Is you need sort of an LLM that is like maybe hooked up with Okta and you get authenticated. Then you get to decide where you go. You don't just let anybody go anywhere. Right, but even then, you need sort of like, especially you more in agents, you're going to need some kind of service mesh. So think of microservices. Think of MCP in a sense of like microservices. How would I think about the way we sort of solved? I won't say capital S solved microservice is the service mesh, right? When we start thinking about how we're going to solve the point-to-point MCP stuff, right? Servers. We're going to need a service mesh. And, I think Chris Posada at Solo AI is doing, amazing work staying on top of something that is moved. Remember, there's 10,000 MCP servers out there right now. And it's only 10 months old. MCP is 10 months old. So he's doing a crazy job. You should follow him on LinkedIn. And then my good friend, Adrian Cole, is over at Tetrate. Tetrate was some of the original Google developers. So these are two companies. And then Envoy has a gateway to LLM gateway. And then Red Hat has a sort of VM. They're pushing LLM VM or LV. I forget which is so many of them, LLM gateway. But like I like these people who have solved this problem at scale in things like Kubernetes Service Mesh. I think they have the best chance to win here. The future is the future. All right, last slide, except for my goodbye slide, is it's not all doom and gloom. Because these folk here, Expo, and I'm not telling you to go buy this Expo product by any means, and I apologize if you work for Expo. I'm just saying, if they can do it, you can do it. So they wrote, they basically claim to be the first AI pen tester that achieved the #1 ranking on HackerOne. Thank you, y'all, because now I can go pull up Claude Flow, and I can try to figure out how to solve my own problem this way. I'll take that spec. I'll do my first prototype. So again, the danger is, the glass is half full, or the glass is half empty because of what I just talked about for the last 30 minutes. But the glass is half full because we can use these same tools to protect ourselves. Thank you all. That's John Willis, and that's me.